even at the start of the tribulation necessarily, but shortly into the tribulation period, before midpoint even, they're going to experience on earth and see and experience in the human sense spiritual beings and spiritual occurrences outside of normal humanity. Yep. But not before that.
Because I think that's going to be just a huge
It's got to be,
shift as far as how do you wrap your head around this eternal being or this spiritual event.
yep. And at the point where we're at, they're totally in full comprehension of the spiritual battle and the source from which the judgment is coming. And they gather, in this passage as we get to the end, they know all of that, and they still gather all together to fight in war to come against God, knowing that's exactly who they're fighting against, because they've cursed him. They've looked to the heavens and cursed God. It says very plainly that that's what they've done, acknowledging where the judgment is coming from and still cursing God. So, which is a crazy thing to think of, knowing that and not turning and repenting, but certainly is what they're doing. And then,
I asked the pastor yesterday what he thought of the Temple Mount, the temple being rebuilt, and he says that he thinks that they're not, that Solomon's temple is next to the Muslim one, and that's how come the Muslims won't necessarily have to all convert in order to make the temple be rebuilt.
yeah.
Is that kind of where you're thinking? Where you're at, or what?
I have heard that, and that's kind of basically there's two thoughts, is that it's on the existing Temple Mount, or at least a portion of it, or that's not actually the accurate, what do you call them? The GPS waypoints of it are actually, off to the side, not exact, so that the Dome of the Rock could stay in place. So I've tried to do some research to figure out that. I'm not convinced enough yet to change my mind, to say, in my mind, I think the Dome of the Rock has to come down. That's just what I've seen in my research.
So you think it has to?
I think it needs to come down.
Yeah, there's an argument that the temple was in the city of David, just above the Gihon Springs. So that would be lower down than where the Temple Mount's at.
Right. Yep.
So that, to me, that would mean that the Muslim community would need to be all right with that.
They're never gonna be all right with
And
it.
that's what I don't understand.
They-
How can all come?
That's the thing. They're not going to be all right no matter where it is, because it's, anti-Islam, basically. That the Jews would rebuild that temple anywhere, certainly on the Temple Mount where the Dome of the Rock is. So I could see how it's very difficult, though, to determine where it is, because all of Jerusalem now is built upon ruins, upon ruins, upon ruins, upon ancient city, and that landscape has changed. We were talking about it at coffee with Joel at 1 o'clock today about how you could possibly have a school bus found in the locations that I've found and others. Roy found a school bus way back in the middle of a swamp somewhere. Like, how did that get there? Well, in Alaska, when we lived there was the school bus. I was 40 miles in moose hunting one time, and off the side of this creek, back in there was this school bus. I was like, there's no way. I mean, it took us hours on four-wheelers traversing the side of this creek to get back into the middle of nowhere. Here's this school bus. Like, how is that possible? Obviously it was, but the landscape had changed. At some point there was maybe a logging trail in there, and that's how they got in. Then those logging trails close in and that kind of thing. Think about that all the way back now thousands of years to where original temple locations. Good luck. You can go now and tour around, biblical sites, and it's just like pile of rock. It doesn't look like much of a city. In fact, I saw Jody's Young's a few pictures she's put up from some trips and things. You know, if you look at those, that could be pretty hard to determine. So there's no, I know I'm right on the location, just what I've kind of researched to say. It seems to me in my research, Temple Mount, where it currently is, seems pretty close, but what do I know? I only know what I've researched, which is what others have researched, because I haven't gone beyond that.
I have a question. I don't see a camera tonight.
No camera, but
Okay.
we are definitely being filmed at this moment. Isn't that freaky? Filmed from afar. Hello, good evening over there. The video system is being used tonight because the video system I was using was pretty poor from what I hear, or from what others were hearing. The sound quality and things were not very well, and so our video person was very helpful and trained my son to get that system up and running so we can have better quality. So we're closing in towards the end, but we still got a few number of weeks to get to chapter 22 to complete this thing, so we'll have good video and audio for a few weeks anyway. We're in chapter 17 tonight in the book of Revelation, and what I realized in studying for this was I've done this study I mentioned before a number of times, different youth ministries, young adult ministries and things that I've done a similar study with, and keep a lot of my notes and even some of the PowerPoints that I just kind of redo and refresh. And what I found was I had nothing for chapter 17. I was like, of course, Easter week, busiest week of my year, and I have nothing for 17. So I had to kind of dig in a little extra myself on this, kind of from scratch on a few of these things, which was a good refresher for myself. So now I feel maybe a little more prepared than I could have been, which is a good thing, on this chapter 17, which is, again, here's the big outline, closing in on finally moving off from letter B in our outline to letter C. Letter B is the tribulation, chapter 6 through 18, so this week and next week gets us to the end of the tribulation, which is kind of funny because the second half of the tribulation has basically only had one chapter of coverage. Everything else has kind of been explaining before, around, and actually chapter 17 and 18, you'll find as far as kind of the setting of this is chapter 17 and 18 is another one of those out of order things that John does. This is not, 17 and 18 are not chronological. What you have is the last verse of chapter 16, which is chapter 16, verse 17, and chapter 19, verse 11, are right back to back as far as occurrences. If you're trying to follow chronologically, there's this little, again, parentheses he does. So all of 17, all of 18 are kind of re-looking at Satan, his unholy trinity, the effects of that in humanity, the religious systems, the economic systems, political systems that are under this happening of the second half of the tribulation, and who they are, and then how they come to ruin. But all of that occurs from the bowl judgments into chapter 19. So 16 and 19 are actually what are connected. 17 and 18 are just what Paul Harvey calls the rest of the story, more of the story. Anybody Paul Harvey fans? I listened to tons of that with my dad.
His wife was from Ludington.
What? Paul Harvey's was?
I got to hear Paul Harvey my junior and senior year. He was our speaker for commencement.
Oh, wow.
His wife was from Ludington.
I had no idea. I'm going to have to tell my dad. He'll be, whoa. But so 17, 18, just fill in some of the gaps. Actually, it's more of the story for us around this second half of the tribulation and what Satan is doing and how he's trying to again, look like God and sway humanity. So that's what we're going to kind of look at. But in looking and studying, if you want a lot of good New Testament commentary, I often will go to a couple different resources. John MacArthur is kind of a New Testament professional. He spent his entire preaching career, or so I hear. He preached for somewhere between 40 and 50 years, and he preached through the New Testament one time in that period. As a pastor, that's what he did. He spent all of that time going through. He also wrote some good commentaries. And he points out a really important focus, or this would be under kind of in your notes, context and setting to what 17 and 18, but especially chapter 17, is really about. Now, I would say this is true of the whole book of Revelation. Revelation is a worship book. We've talked about that, a song book, it's got song, but it's really about worship, and it's about who are you worshiping. And this chapter 17, when it talks about the scarlet beast and the scarlet harlot, or the scarlet prostitute, the great prostitute, and the beast, it's really this woman is a reflection of worship, false worship, religion, as it has created a false sense of worship, but it's really this false worship is the woman, and it says in here, also called Babylon, right? Babylon's mentioned here. All of that, if you trace that back through Scripture, Babylon, false worship, really began around the Tower of Babel. And Noah, as in Noah and the Ark's great-grandson, what's his name? Nimrod, there it is. Nimrod, which most people don't call their sons, they don't give their sons the name, they don't name their daughters Jezebel, and they don't name their sons Nimrod, right? Nimrod has a negative connotation. What's a Nimrod? It's like a moron. You don't call your son moron by naming them Nimrod, right? But Nimrod was the lead person in the false worship at the Tower of Babel. And what did God do there? And what was that really about? Well, they were building these great big towers, and Nimrod led the charge to say, we're going to build a tower to God all the way up into heaven so we can basically do it ourselves, do it our own way. They weren't worshiping the way of God. And God confounds language and scatters all of those who are trying to basically create their own way of false worship. And that scattering and spreading is really, you could trace false worship all the way back to that. And those who continued in that manner were listed throughout kind of the history of the Jewish people, God's people. They kept coming against one another. And this Babylon, the land of Shinar, if you hear in the Old Testament that phrase used, the land of Shinar, is talking about that place of Babylon. And really, this false worship is about idolatry of the heart, not worshiping God, worshiping yourself, or worshiping something other than God. And so at the heart of all of this, that is to say, this is about worship. This chapter is about worship. But it's just a picture of why God would enact the judgment that he is, because this, if you're going to do something, the greatest commandment of God is to love him first, foremost, chiefly, with all your heart, soul, and mind, and not to have any other idols in place of him. Well, false worship is at the heart of who Satan is and what he's doing in the end times. And so we'll see that work itself out. That's just kind of there's the long history lesson foundation part of this chapter 17 as it relates to what's happening here. Who is this prostitute, woman, harlot, and who's this beast? And they're both described as scarlet. So here's your picture to kind of get. There's kind of there's a lot of things going on, again, building a bigger picture of what some of the things we've seen, like this beast, this scarlet beast, we've seen. It's really, it's just a use of Satan and representative of a lot of things. It seems both the woman and the beast, as we'll dig into here, are not just a woman. It's not just a seven-headed, 10-horned dragon or beast of purple color that's on the water. There's much more depth to what those things are representing. So there's chapter 17. Here we go. We'll start with verses 1 and 2, which are really, this chapter 1 and 2 is an invitation, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. You're invited to see the judgment of this great prostitute. So verses 1 and 2 says, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk.'" Wow, that starts out strong, right? Quite a picture. There's one of the angels, so this is where we know this is kind of giving a broader picture, but it stems right off from chapter 16. The 7 bowls have just been poured out. So one of those angels that poured out the bowls grabs John and says, "Come, I'm going to show you the judgment of God on this great prostitute." So the chapter 16, it could be any, it doesn't say which of the 7, just one of the 7 angels who poured out those bowls. So we know from last week, all the different bowls, each had its own angel. Again, nothing in particular to note about this one angel, who it is, which bowl, or anything like that. But the purpose, again, of all this is seeing the judgment of God and then starting to build a picture of who is this that we're talking about. So there's a judgment on the great prostitute who's seated on many waters. And so waters in Scripture has a lot of different meanings, understandings, but typically it's either representing a place that has many waters, either a large body of water or rivers, important rivers of water, so physical water, or oftentimes you'll get a spiritual, as Jesus talks about being the living water, or in this case, I believe the many waters is talking about humanity. And we'll see that work itself out because it explains it as such later on in this passage. So this great prostitute is seated on many waters. It's not actually a lady sitting on a bunch of people. It is a representation of many, many people. So the woman is representative of the heart of the people in this time, and really for all time, because if you look at the first humans who fell into sin, Adam and Eve, they began by wrongly not obeying God and worshiping incorrectly. And incorrect worship has been a fault of humanity all the way through. Well, it continues to the end here. So the many waters representing many people, like I said, I think it's verse 15. That describes that. There's a number of questions about who is this woman, this scarlet woman. We'll develop that a little bit more here, but it talks about that being Babylon, that being Jerusalem, that being, like I said here, represented over or amongst many people. Verse 2, though, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. The kings of the earth are going to be described with the horns that are on the beast, and The kings of the earth are typically either a kingdom, one of the 7 great kingdom periods that are described, or it's literally talking about rulers on earth in the end time, which we'll see that there are 10 of those. Those are future kings, future rulers of regions or nations. So the kings of the earth basically is representing rulers. Leaders of the earth have committed sexual immorality with the great prostitute. It's pretty graphic terminology, but everybody gets it. The immorality of sexual nature is kind of the one that grabs you, right? And it's like, it's in your face, it's vile, it's sin is sin, but when it comes to the sin of sexual immorality, it's just something that humanity takes really serious, but has the most problem with. And that's all the way through. So not only have the kings, the rulers have this problem, the dwellers on earth, that basically saying everybody has a problem with this. They've become drunk on it. They've become completely engrossed. The entire world is overcome with sexual immorality as a physical act, yes. Lust of the heart, lust of the eyes, lust of the mind, yes. All of those things have completely overcome. We could look around our society and say, yep, that's pretty real today. It's also kind of, I think, in reference to just, again, that idolatry of the heart, desiring something more than God in your life, in a sense. So this whole passage builds on itself and explains itself more as you go along. So you kind of have to move through it to answer some of these questions better. But any thoughts, questions on the first? Here, the invitation is most of all to watch as God enacts his judgment. And really the invitation is for John. Watch and see what's going to happen. John gets to see all of God's justice. Ultimately, this judgment is revealing God's righteousness, holiness, judgment. And it's a right judgment for these acts.
So you probably explained this before, but I've already forgotten. What is the great prostitute? Is it Satan? Is it the false prophet? Which one is
Is the woman or the beast?
great prostitute?
So I haven't said yet,
Oh, you haven't, okay.
but it's
Because I know that you've
but it's the next part.
in other chapters, you
Right. The great city we've talked about. There's lots of greats because you've got a great prostitute, you've got a great beast, a great city, a number of things, and that greatness is not in like a good sense. It's in the wicked, a greatly wicked sense. So this is where we're going to go next, kind of describing. Okay, who is that? Yeah. And we have to work through it all the way to even the last verse, into verse 18, to really understand who it is. So verses 3 to 6 say this, and he carried me away. This is that angel, one of the ones who poured out the bowl. So he does more than just pour out bowls of judgment. He takes John to places. Carried him away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in a purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and jewels, pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. Okay, so here's a little bit more about the woman, but you'll notice in all of these contexts, she's going to be tied to the beast. And that's an intentional to better understand who she is, what she's really all about. But even as the chapter finishes, they seem to be working together, and then the beast turns on her, which is weird. But that's what happens. It also further explains who she is. So as we look John is carried away into the wilderness. Where is that? Is that carried away, it says, in the Spirit, into a wilderness. So he's been carried away in the Spirit to see all of these revelations, these pictures, things. So that's not surprising. But into the wilderness, we've talked a little bit about wilderness as far as a place where God's chosen or protected run away and find a safe place to be. That doesn't seem to be what this is about, because this is not a good or safe place. It's describing where the beast and the woman are. So this seems to be, it could be spiritual, relating to the woman and the beast, that it's like a desert there. If you're with God, you have the springs of living water. If you're worshiping Satan, there's no spiritual water or eternal life to be found. So it could be of spiritual nature. Could also be geographical at this point. Remember what's happened now. All of the bowl judgments have been poured out. Everything's been burned up. Everything's been broken apart. In fact, the last great earthquake and hail came down. It flattened every mountain and wiped away every island. So wilderness could literally mean the barren wasteland that remains on earth. So it could be a combination of both. That's kind of my thought, is it's describing a spiritual nature and geographical location or description of the earth. So John's carried away to this place, and there finds this woman on the beast. Scarlet beast. She's in purple and scarlet. So scarlet woman, scarlet beast, purple. If you think about those colors, what are those colors? What comes to your mind? Scarlet and purple. Royalty. What else?
Well, to me, it's, I think the image comes of a priest saying mass.
A priest saying mass.
Yep, holding a golden cup.
The golden chalice to which maybe to drink communion from. Yep, there's a number of pictures that can, and as you look at Scripture, purple certainly is something we often look to towards royalty, and even scarlet. Though scarlet in particular can reference both blood and sin within Scripture. And so I think the scarlet is certainly referring to that. Purple is noted as a different color for the woman. So I think there's if you would, a priestly or religious element to her purpleness. But there's also the blood, sin related to the scarlet color of both the beast and the woman. Again, this is tying the two together with their color meaning something. It's also, there's another tie of the woman sitting on the beast who has blasphemous names. This list of blasphemous names is the beast. He's got blasphemous names. Well, we know that's how Satan rolls. He's continuing to have blasphemy against God on his lips all the time. So he has that later on here. The abominations are written on the woman, and it's of the same nature of the blasphemous names there. So again, there's a description of 7 heads and 10 horns. We've heard that before. We're hearing that kind of throughout. There is a tie to that, to what this beast is, but it's an interesting tie with this woman who's with her. She not only has purple and scarlet, she's adorned with gold, jewels, pearls, holding a golden cup. So again, those kind of descriptions seem like royal or at least wealth, right? If you were a wealthy person in ancient times, you would adorn yourself with gold and jewels and maybe even the color purple, which was harder to get, and so it meant wealth. So I think there is some tie to how she's adorned, referring to wealth. But what I think we'll really see here is, and I'm going to give you a inside to both this chapter and next. This chapter, I think we see the destruction of the religious system, that she represents the religious system. And chapter 18, we see the destruction of the political, economic, militaristic power. in the full destruction of Babylon. So the prostitute is, I believe, representing religious Babylon, religiosity, false worship, the religious system itself. And we know that the beast, Satan, has taken over all of those systems to control humanity. What we see is the false prophet is kind of the head, has been the head of the religious system, the false religious system of the world during the tribulation. And so the woman, if she's the religious system, she's been used by Satan to rally people around something, which is worship. We were all created. Humanity was created to worship. And so a false sense of worship through a false religious system, that I believe is what's representing the woman. Way in the back. Alan.
There's a lot of people saying that the Catholic Church in Rome is the scarlet.
Right.
And they have a lot of evidence to back that up. What do you say to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things within Revelation, specifically this chapter 17, that would align with that thought, that this woman, if she was representing a religious system, okay, a global type dominant religious system that's in opposition to true Christianity, to God himself, who has wealth and power, that all aligns. We're not there yet, but the 7 mountains that are described here, Rome is built on 7 mountains. And so there's a lot of things that point towards the possibility of, I think the Roman Catholic Church is included in this woman, but she alone is not the Roman Catholic Church. I think it's any false worship, not worshiping of God could be represented within this woman, this harlot, this prostitute. They have taken something, the most holy thing, act of God for humanity of worship, and prostituted it, made it an abomination, made it into false worship. Ultimately, it's worshiping Satan. What it's been, basically, Satan has tricked humanity into worshiping him instead of worshiping God. And this woman represents the human element of the false religious system. And everybody buys in. Everybody's buying into this false religion. Does that kind of make sense? Mark?
I don't want to make too much about what I'm going to say, but it brought to mind in the news with the Russia-Ukraine war and Putin being the head of the Russian government, and Patriarch Kirill from the Russian Orthodox Church, the head of that, the church aligning themselves and supporting that war.
Mm-hmm.
It almost, what brought to my mind was the church prostituting themselves for kind of a unifying power or something like that.
For sure.
And again, I don't want to say that this is not talking about that necessarily.
Right.
But it just, that's what.
Yeah, it might not specifically be Russia, but that is a good picture of why this is described as a harlot, as prostituting itself, because it's giving itself away for money, for power, for control.
It's a pretty significant condemnation of the Catholic Church.
It is, and that's where I say it's, in my mind, as I interpret, it's broader than just the Catholic Church. It's for all humanity who does not believe in the way, the one way to God. They're all represented in this prostitute. So it's harsh for... It doesn't let the Catholic Church off either. Correct. Now, I would side note, I believe there are true believers within a Catholic Church, possible, who could believe. Now, if they do, then they can't believe all that the Roman Catholic Church is teaching, kind of thing. But that's just a little side note. But I think, again, I think this represents, and again, this as the chapter builds to the end, we'll see this, I think, build to, That it took me working through it to get to the, oh, I get it, I think, part. That multiple systems, it's not just one system represented in this woman, because what Satan wants is one system, not many. He wants one world religion, and multiple world religions of false religion kind of culminate under the representation of this woman. That's why he goes after her, to destroy her. Why would he destroy her? She's working for him. She's getting everybody under the same umbrella sort of thing. Because ultimately it's about him, not this woman. So they work together, but she's not Satan. She's not the false prophet. She's not the Antichrist. She's not the dragon or the beast. She's a human representation. The beast is satanic representation. So she has a golden cup full of abominations. That golden cup is an interesting, again, it's religiosity. It's money and wealth and power in place of true worship. On her forehead is written this, a name. The name is of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abomination. So on her forehead is this. That's kind of something we've already seen, right? You take the mark and you receive the mark on your forehead or your hand. So that's where I think, again, this is a human representation. And the cup is abomination. It's false worship. It's against what God has. But the mystery element is kind of an interesting, what's a mystery? I think the mystery is, who is Babylon?
I'm going to stop you right there because when you said human representation, are you saying that this is a person, or are you saying it's representing humanity of that time?
I think it's representing humanity.
Okay.
Some would say this is the Pope.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to know, are you talking about a specific person?
Right.
Or are you talking about representation in general?
Yep. That's where some would say, if this is representing a religious system and it's the Roman Catholic Church, then the woman herself is an individual, and that individual is the Pope. I don't agree with that.
I was just trying to get to where you're going when you say human representation.
Yep, I would say representing humanity,
Okay.
not a single individual.
There are several things that are in here. One would be New World Order secularism.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a religion in many respects. So, and looking for the one ruler concept
Yeah.
there. So, without really getting into the problems with the Catholic Church and stuff, there could be a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's a lot of problematic things within that structure, right?
I'm going to jump in and say one more thing. Because I was in the military and I did a lot of traveling around the world, we need to also consider Muslims. There are a lot of people in this world that are Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
And so to just say it's Catholics, Muslims are led astray from
Right.
from the day they said that it wasn't Isaac, that it was Ishmael.
Right.
They've been led astray for a long time. So,
Yep.
I kind of lean towards what you're saying, that it's a generalized, it's not one specific religion. It's going the wrong way,
Yep.
choosing the wrong option.
If it's centered around Satan, which I believe that's at the heart of this, out of a heart for him to be like God and worshiped like God, it shouldn't be a surprise at all that he's going to manipulate and deceive and lie to all humanity using something that we feel we need and even we were created for, which is worship, against us to make us worship him. That's that's the picture I'm seeing here. He's manipulated the need created within us to worship something and just religiosity itself, that nature in us, against us. And then he goes against even that to make sure it's still all about him. He's so jealous for his own glory that that's what he's doing here. He's using humanity.
Can I even go one step farther and say, couldn't that just plain be It's all about themselves.
Yeah.
It's a religion of self.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Mark?
I'm listening to the various comments, and the thing that's occurring to me is that this woman, and it's depicted or described as a woman, but from a male's head, okay, male's mind, a woman would tend to attract churches, whether it's an Islamic faith, whether it's a Catholic faith, whether it's Jehovah's Witness, whether it's Mormon, whatever it is, and she's a prostitute in the sense that, or this grouping represented by this female figure is a group of religions that have taken their eyes off of Yahweh
Yep.
and attracted and led astray the various groups or components that make up that. Is that what you're getting at?
I haven't gotten there yet,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but this is what I would say the woman is actually a representation when you talk about Babylon. Her name is written there, and great city is mentioned. Well, great city, as it's used in Scripture, typically represents two different things. It's either representing the great city in the spiritual, you could say positive sense, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the great city. Or Babylon, the wicked, greatly wicked. I think it's both of those who are now working together. Humanity, because Jerusalem, in a sense, I think is representing religiosity of humanity, and Babylon, the wickedness of humanity, have now morphed into the same thing. It is, it's, some would say, no, it's just Jerusalem because the bride of Christ is being adulterous against God, and therefore she's a prostitute. So this is the bride of Christ in that God's chosen people who haven't believed in him, the Jews represented in the great city of Jerusalem, are prostituting towards Satan and away from God. I think there's that part of this understanding, along with all religions who falsely, are not believing in God, are contained within that. So I think it's both Jerusalem and Babylon represented in this woman, in that, we all have opportunity to be the bride of Christ. Instead, humanity prostituted itself to a false god for false worship. And Satan uses ourselves against us, right? We worship ourselves, that humanism and all of that. But ultimately, he wants himself to be worshipped, so he'll use that against us too.
So it'll be kind of like a combination of our of individual selfishness, because to me, I think about Sodom and Gomorrah and how the Bible says that Sodom and Gomorrah will be nothing compared to what the end times will be like.
Right?
So to me, it could be a combination of the two of
Yep.
wickedness gone to the extreme.
Yep.
Plus religiosity or whatever.
Yep.
The combination of the two.
And that's why I think Babylon is a great word picture, because Babylon's talking about Old Testament, right? It's not talking about, there's no Babylon right now in the literal sense, but one of the seven kingdoms was Babylon, right? You've got Rome being the sixth, and New Rome the seventh, but all those kingdoms listed within there. So Babylon, again, think about what happened with all the world had to be wiped out at Noah. Why? Because they had gotten to this point. Again, Sodom and Gomorrah, they got to this point. So we see all these Old Testament pictures of humanness to its wicked extreme, and God doesn't allow it. He ends it. He wipes out all the earth except for Noah and his sons when they get to a point. And this is the worst of that, and therefore, requires the worst of judgment. So it's that picture. And another picture, verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. So this woman, this grouping, if you will, is involved in the martyrdom of saints during the tribulation. There's that picture. Well, if you don't take the mark and worship the beast, again, this is tied to worship, then what happens? You're put to death. If you don't have the mark, you're put to death. It gets to that point. And so she is responsible. She's being used by Satan. So it's not just Satan who's killing. Other humans are killing other humans who don't take the mark. They're working for him. So she is involved in that. Drunk with the blood of the saints. So in that sense, there's she's receiving pleasure and enjoyment out of killing of believers. It's nasty. Her and the beast, both. Really, blood-stained is the idea of both of these. That's that scarletness, is talking about the blood-stainedness of their sin and their wickedness against God and his people. Like, what do you mean, no? Okay. So verses 7 and 8 talk about the origin. This is, again, 7 and 8 are more connection. It's not necessarily just the origin, it's the connection, I would say, of the woman. Verse 7, but the angel said to me, why do you marvel? So John marvels there at the end of verse 6 at seeing this picture, this woman on the beast. This is the angel still talking. I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast with the 7 heads, 10 horns that carries her. The beast you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. There's that Satan copycatting thing, right? He was and is to come. Was and is not and is to come. So the angel says, why are you acting all surprised? John kind of sees that, and he's like, marvel not in like, wow, that's really cool, as in, I don't understand, is more the idea, I think, behind his marveling. It's maybe some wonder, not sure, maybe it's fear or not comprehending why the woman and the beast are working together. But the angel says, let me explain it to you. This is who the beast is, with the 10 horns, 7 heads. He's the one who you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit to destruction. Satan does a false resurrection. There's a wounded head that seems to be healed, and that's Satan basically doing a false resurrection. It'll seem like something was related to Satan, the beast, the Antichrist is dead but comes to life again. And everybody on earth says, oh, wow, see? They're marveling at Satan, at the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. And even that's a good representation to one, Satan trying to be just like God, imitating him in every way possible, yet not truly being so, because he's not God. So the angel's basically kind of saying, don't be surprised that the woman and beast are working together. John, I think in some sense, sees some religious element to the woman and says, why is she now with him, working with Satan? That doesn't make sense. But the false resurrection, the mortal wound, is to really garner, again, more worship, more followers, more deception from Satan to those whose names aren't written in the book of life, to those who don't believe. I don't know why they need more deceiving, other than the fact that they have now acknowledged God but are still choosing Satan. He's performing, it seems, miracles to keep them following him. Questions? Mark?
I'm trying to work through this last part, and the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. So the first part of that sentence is that I see two possibilities. I'm not sure which one to say. In other words, the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, is that talking about God's omnipotence, knowing from the very just saying that this list, these people have been written in the book of life from early on,
Right.
from the foundations of the world, not like since Christ, but from the foundations of the world to that time.
Yeah,
Does that question make sense?
it does. I don't know if you
These are the people that are left on earth after
all the stuff.
rapture.
Yep. So these are unbelievers. There's an element of this that some may agree or not agree with me on how I would interpret this. I would say that God has predestined those. That's what Paul says. He uses that word. Chosen, elected, predestined. This is the same terminology to me. So it's, if you will, Calvinistic in theology, who would say this is just another affirmation of from the foundation of the world. That is, before humans were ever born or created, God knew whose name would be in the book of life. We know that's true, right? But in his omnipotence, he knew that. He knows things from all eternity past to all eternity present and future. So he knows the names that will be in the book of life. Even that's not overly Calvinistic. That's God's omnipotence. So I don't know if that answers the question or just.
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand how the first part attaches to the second part of that sentence.
The ones who are on earth, then from the foundation. So the ones who are on earth are the ones who are still alive here, yet to come against God, who survived all the judgment so far, and are still following Satan, and aren't believing in God.
Are you missing that not, Mark? Not been written in the book of life?
This whole thing was a can of worms when I read that. And so I'm just trying to, I should be quiet and just listen because I'm kind of muddled through it while I'm talking. I shouldn't do that, so.
Yep. So they're marveling. John is marveling at the beast and the woman, but in a different way, these unbelievers who aren't going to believe ever, that's another way I'd word this, not written in the book of life, are marveling at the one they're worshiping because he's doing miracles for them. And the angel says, don't marvel at either of those things. This is God's plan. He knows he's sovereign. That's another way I would summarize. John makes it complicated sometimes in the way he writes in words. But again, this will build. It's even the it was and is not and is to come is further explained here. So we'll keep rolling and it'll keep explaining. The 7 heads of the beast are described again, verses 9 through 11. This calls for the mind of wisdom. I love that phrase. Who do you think that phrase is for?
I would hope the believers.
It's got to be. Because,
Hope it would be, I remember the verse at the beginning that says, something about wise is he who chooses to read this book. Or
right,
something like that.
and blessed. Yep.
Hopefully we're smart enough to.
There's just, John uses these phrases occasionally in the writing, and it seems to be these little, because obviously believers are going to be reading this. He's written them to churches. So, so this calls for the mind of wisdom, but it can't be for verse 8 people, because their name is not in the book of life. So hey, Christians, I think even this is going to require the Holy Spirit to help you with, but he helped me with, and here's some further explanation with. So wisely listen and read these words, and then you'll understand. Kind of. So here's the description of wisdom. 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Okay, there's the woman again. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. 1 is, the other not yet to come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not and is an 8th, but belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction.
This part here.
It's a riddle inside of a, what's the phrase? Inside of an enigma, inside of puzzle or something. I forget how that phrase
I
goes.
don't think anybody has this part figured out. I really don't.
This one's tough. That's why it takes what he says at the beginning of verse 9. Hey, this is going to take some wisdom. This is going to take more than a little bit of wisdom. This is going to take tons of Holy Spirit help me with. But the 7 heads, this is a description of what this beast is representing. 7 heads are 7 mountains. Oh, 7 mountains, Rome. I mean, you couldn't get more clear. If you just stop there, this is Rome, period. Rome is built on 7 mountains. That's literally the description historically of the city of Rome and its power, its authority, its military, strategicness, all of the stuff. If you take Roman history and dig into it, Rome was built on 7 mountains.
So a lot of theologians believe this is Rome.
You could infer that if you stopped right there.
Okay,
That's what I would say.
okay.
But you can't stop there. That's not the whole of the context, not even the whole of these 2 verses. The woman is seated on 7 mountains. Okay, so the woman is seated in Rome. That's the Roman Catholic Church. Who's leading the Roman Catholic Church in Rome, the Vatican City? It's the Pope. Boom. But you can't stop here. Verse 10 is a continuation. It's not a period even at the end of verse 9. It's a semicolon. They, what's they? The 7 heads and the 7 mountains are also, so they're not just 7 mountains, they are also 7 kings. Okay? What does kings represent? Well, it doesn't give necessarily further description to the kings, but if you just read the description that follows that, 5 who have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. Stop there. This is the time of John. John is writing at this time. I think 7 kings, theologians, not just I, theologians, many would say 7 kings are talking about 7 kingdoms, not kings. 5 of these kingdoms, at this point when John's writing, have ruled. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Yeah, so the 5 fallen, I would say, are Egypt, then Assyria, then Babylon, Medo-Persia, which is 1, and the 5th is Greece. Those are the 5 kingdoms that have already taken place prior to John. And then he says 1 is. The Roman Empire is ruling while John is living. That's the one that is. The other has not yet come. So the 7th, so 5 have fallen. Those are already done. 1 is ruling, that is Rome. 1 is yet to come. The 7th kingdom is yet to come. That would be the future kingdom of wickedness, which is when Satan's ruling, which is Babylon, or revived Rome. Those 2, I would say, are similar or the same. Are you raising your hand, Alan? No, itching your hand. I thought that. Okay. So that's how I would say these 7 kings represent 7 kingdoms. Mountains, you could tie those as physical mountains where Rome is. Mountains also represent seats of authority, places of ruling authority. So I think the mountains and the kings both, since they're tied together with this, they are also 7 kings, is referring to these kingdoms of men who have ruled, and the one has not yet come, but we stopped there. Let's continue. Okay, the description here is about the one who's yet to come. The one that's yet to come, and when he does, not when it does, when he does, the 7th kingdom come, he must remain only a little while. This is what I would say is the kingdom of the Antichrist. Well, where does he rule from? Where did the abomination of desolation? Yeah, we're not there yet. Let's work through the 7th king first. 7th king is the Antichrist, but he's represented not a king, but a kingdom. He's ruling from Jerusalem because he came and destroyed the rebuilt temple and set up his place of authority there. So he's the one yet to come. He's the kingdom yet to come, but he only remains for a little while. 3.5 years, in fact. If you think about all these other kingdoms, how long did Rome rule? How long did Babylon rule, or Greece, or, decades, great periods of time. This one that remains for just a little while, other versions say for only an hour. Oh, what? What's an hour? An hour is apparently 3.5 years. So when God says his return is soon, maybe we could work that out in some kind of mathematical equation. No, don't do that. That's bad. He comes and remains only a little while. He's only in power for a little bit. Then verse 11, as for the beast that was and is not, he's describing what we didn't understand from verse 8. So John's trying to help us out. He's just a little confusing still. So this is reference to verse 8. As for the beast that was and is not and is an eighth, but belongs to the seven and goes to destruction. I think this is just an affirmation of what we just determined. It's just a confusing way to say it.
You lost me. So the five that were Egypt, Syria, Babylon, something
Medo-Persia?
Greece. So are we in the Roman then?
Nope, John's in Rome, but Rome fell.
Okay, so 6 was Rome.
Yep.
What is 7?
7 is New Rome.
Are we, but it also says that 7, you also said 7 was the Antichrist.
Right.
So
7,
you confused me.
Antichrist and New Rome are the same thing. Because he comes in and sets up a new power, kingdom, authority on earth. He comes into Jerusalem to declare that and take his throne there. He sets up a false image of himself there. And it...
So we are in the 7th kingdom, and the 7th kingdom is also when the Antichrist is coming. Is that what you're saying?
Are you asking if, like me and you, are in the 7th kingdom?
I'm saying Rome was the 6th.
Yep.
So are you saying that this kingdom that we're in right now is the 7th, which is the new Rome and the time of Antichrist?
So the 7th kingdom is New Rome and Antichrist. That's one and the same. You and I living today are in the holy in-between. We are in between Kingdom 6 and Kingdom 7.
So we're not in either kingdom.
I would say no. You and I are living in, I call it, I don't know what you want to call it, I call it the holy in-between, the church age, in between the last kingdom, Rome, and the final kingdom, New Rome, Babylon, Antichrist. It's called a lot of things.
So we're not in any kingdom, we're just in between, huh?
We're in the period of church age or the period of grace. If you want to, that's what I call the in-between.
Is that literally Rome or just figuratively Rome?
Yes, that's the question. I think that it is not physically Rome. It's not the city of Rome. That was done away with. Just like all the other kingdoms, now it's New Rome, New Babylon. I mean, Babylon was one of the first 5. It fell. It's basically, and this is where 8 and 7 make more sense, is Satan says, okay, all of those former kingdoms, I pull them together and I am all of them together. So you could say he's the 8th, but he's not. He's just the combination of all 7. That's kind of what the really confusing verse 11 is saying.
So when it says, as for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7th.
And that's a lot of,
Not the 7th, the other 7.
yeah, belongs to the other 7 in that, yeah. So confusing way to say it.
And what's the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw? What was the feet were made of clay and what was the other?
Right. What he's seeing there is kingdoms,
Yeah,
right? Yep, all the,
and the feet are the final kingdom that are made of clay and what was the? Was it rock? Was it rock? I forget what it was.
yep,
Because it was a combination of the prior one.
right. And that is the same representation of what's being described here. Yep, that's where the Old Testament, New Testament, those are combining here, which is weird because it seems like that's such a spread out period of time, but in God's eyes it's not, right? And so that's even where this beast that was, is not, and is. He was, Rome was, it is during John, then it's not going to be, but is going to be again. That is, Satan's going to represent that final kingdom that comes against God. All of those kingdoms, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, they were ultimately the pictures, they weren't just global authority, powerhouse things. They were also against God, against God's people, persecuting God's people, enslaving God's people, martyring God's people, all the way to Rome. They all did it. So that's just, Satan culminates all of that into one.
So you brought up the Catholic Church earlier. What is the determining factor of when Rome ended? Because you were talking about, could the Catholic Church be the kingdom of Rome?
Right.
Like, what determined that fact?
Yeah, so obviously the Roman Catholic Church didn't. It's still going strong today. Rome as a global power, the Roman Empire, is no more. So in that sense, it's not. The Roman Catholic Church, I think, is just contained within this woman as a wrong, false worship. Yep. Okay. Clear as mud. Here we go. 10 horns of the beast. So not only does it have 7 heads, it has 10 horns. And just for some more wisdom, John helps us in describing what they are. Verse 12, and the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings. Oh, great, more kings. What? Okay, so 10 kings who have not received royal power, but they are to receive authority of kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind. They hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords, King of kings. And those with him are called and chosen and faithful. So, John does describe these 10 kings. Who are the 10 kings? Are they kings? Are they kingdoms? I think if you just, again, work your way through this. These kings, I think, are individuals representing regions, kingdoms, nations. So these are 10 men ruling presidents, whatever, who have not yet received royal power. That wording, I think, is important. These are kings yet to come. As far as when John's writing this, these 10 kings have not been. They are yet to come, yet to receive their power. They are going to receive their power, their authority as kings for 1 hour. That's talking future sense at the end of the tribulation for a short time together with the beast. So it's during that time period when these kings are in power and authority, and they do it with him, and they're of one mind, verse 13 says. So these kings have the same mindset. Well, their mindset is, we're ruling in things, but we give all of our authority singular in unity to the beast. And then the beast says, okay, this is what we're doing. As the head over this new kingdom, these 10 kings say, we're with you, and they all make war, verse 14, on the Lamb. Well, who are they, or who could they be?
What I heard or read about was that when there's a one world government, right? That the earth will be divided, you mentioned 10 regions, in order to kind of govern this a little bit closer. And so that's, these 10 kings are, it's not going to be probably based on the boundaries we know now.
I don't think it can be. Because of when these kings are in ruling authority and power is now in the tribulational timeline. Well, what does that look like? The world is literally just hanging on by a few threads. It is nothing like the world we know now. So you couldn't say that any of these 10 kings, oh, it's the European Union. No, it's not. It can't be that. What's in existence left on earth in humanity or the earth itself is such a shattered mess of whatever. That's why these are not yet receiving their power or authority, or we couldn't know who they are, where they're from. That develops within this short period of time. So that's where this one you really can't, you don't know who they are, where they're from, that kind of thing. Mark?
So the wording of king and authority as kings for 1 hour,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's literal or just descriptive in terms of all this takes place in a space of about 3 years, right?
Right.
So in terms of a nation building up and stuff, they're gonna have just a millisecond of authority.
Yes. Yep, that's definitely the idea. And which would make sense with that much destruction, chaos all over the world. They've just got a little bit of organization. And okay, let's all get together under this guy who clearly is in charge and come against the one who's causing us all this problem. So it comes together real quickly, even their kingdoms or the regions they represent. It's what's left, I think. Yep, and again, it's what they do, verse 14, but what we already know. The Lamb will conquer them. Why? Because he is Lord of Lords, capital L, little l, capital K, little k. And the ones who are with him, they're called chosen and faithful. Those who are with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. They are chosen and faithful. Okay, let's finish this out. The woman, the waters the woman sits on, this is, again, just kind of a reference back a little bit. The angel says to me, this is all descriptive. Like, here's explanation of these pictures. God knows we need some explanation. Doesn't even mean that we'll understand it all, but there's a reason that the angel is explaining to John as well. The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, the waters is everybody who's left. Humanity is what the waters represent. So the woman who's on the beast on the water is humanity as well. So it represents all the peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. That one's pretty straightforward. It kind of explains itself as such. Because the beast is ruling over them. The religious system has been ruling over them or organizing them, both of those things. The last, kind of weird, out of the blue, kind of maybe confusing. Oh, that's verse 15. Is the destruction of the woman, verses 16 to 18, the last couple of verses. All this picture of how these are so tied together and they're working together and they've bonded all humanity under their feet. And then verse 16, and the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind, handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. What? What happened? The kings, the 10 horns, because that's what was just described. The 10 horns represent the 10 kings. They and the beast together hate the prostitute. Why? I thought they were working together. Now they're not. Now they make her naked, desolate, devour her flesh, burn her up with fire. They turn on the religious system. Basically, they eliminate the religious system at this point. And so the kings really represent what's next in chapter 18, military, economic, political power. And those take over religious system. Religious system now is completely wiped off. Okay, that's kind of weird that there's that quick turn of events. But why? Verse 17, for God put it into their hearts. God put it into the king's hearts, the 10 horns' hearts, to do this until the words of God are fulfilled. This is about God's plan. God uses, as instruments of his own plan, even Satan himself and all of humanity who's outrightly rejecting him to still accomplish his plan.
This is just like what we're leading up to the crucifixion. It's the exact same thing. It's politics, religion, and Satan.
Yep. All thinking they've won, too. We've just, Satan thinking I've just defeated God when Jesus dies. No. That's not at all. Jesus has the victory. This was part of his plan. That's the same wording that's happening here. This is God's plan. He put it into their hearts even to carry out this purpose. What's the purpose? To wipe out false religion. He uses Satan and unbelieving humanity to wipe out false religion. Wow.
So I just want to get something clear in my head.
Okay.
So the waters are the multitudes, the nations and the languages, right?
Mhm.
And then the prostitute is the religions? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, verse 18 is a description further of the woman. The woman you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Wait, didn't the kings just destroy her? Yes. But before they did, she had rule over them. The religious system was controlling the political system. But here, that ends. The religious system, which is represented within humanity as some sort of grouping of, or is it a singular religion? I think it's a grouping of false worship, is taken out of the ruling class, and the kings now think they're, this is our time, military, political, economic power, no more religious anything. And then chapter 18 goes into the fall of Babylon the Great. Wait, didn't we just see that? Isn't the prostitute Babylon? Yes. Babylon is also these kings that think now that the religious people and religious fanatic ruling is done. They kill other human beings who are religiously controlling everything, and now militarily and economically they're controlling, and God says, no, I've used you to wipe out false religion. Now I'm going to wipe out all the other things that are false. That's what chapter 18 talks about. Again, that's all contained within the judgments of the bowl thing. This is just further description. So we understand better, maybe.
Tower struck.
Yeah.
So what? And again, I just keep thinking back with Rome and the Jews at the time of the crucifixion. Rome tolerated the Jews and their leadership.
Yep.
Because it kept the peace.
Yep.
They liked things quiet. It looked good back in Rome if their area was peaceful.
Yep.
And so they tolerated each other, but they didn't like each other.
No, the Romans hated the Jews. And when they weren't valuable to them anymore to keep their power, do their thing, whatever, they made human torches. They invented the Colosseum. They, crucified the leader of them.
So this just looks to me like history repeating itself.
Yes.
Only it's all religion now.
Right.
And just get rid of it all because it's been a burr in our saddle since forever. And so we're just going to get rid of them all.
Yep.
That's the way it looks to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you think about it, and maybe I'm wrong here, but religion in the broader sense brings morality into the world.
Yeah.
And you've got this immoral woman, and then they, apparently you've got this world religion that's got at least some level of morality, and then the kings want to destroy this woman. So
Yep.
the world turns even more immoral,
If, right, even possible, right. That this religious system now is embracing open immorality, and even that is too moral for the kingdoms of men, sort of thing. So that's the the ultimate wickedness of the state of things at this point. Yep. Which is, I mean, you can find pictures of this and,
It's also eliminating possible competition too.
oh yeah, for sure. Yep. The picture, I think, is pre-flood. All humanity has got to be wiped out. I mean, that's kind of a major deal, right? To the state of things that are described in everybody but Noah, and his 3 sons. There's only that many people in the entire world of however many hundreds, thousands, millions people. Everyone else is completely rotten, wicked. Yep, that's the same thing at this point in humanity. And they've just gone through all those judgments too, and they're still at that stage. So, whew. Okay, we did it. Chapter 17. Chapter 18 next week. Pictures. There are pictures to draw. Some fun ones here from this chapter. So, and I made it easy to very accessible for you to come up and. Yeah, it's kind of hard. How do you draw a harlot and be appropriate? Do your best. Okay. Thanks for joining us. I know it's always interesting, challenging study, but there's always the purpose of this. I really believe it's all about the glory of God. This is a book about right worship. Well, to know what right worship is, there's a picture of what wrong worship is here too, and so that's seen. Thanks, everybody.